Good evening and welcome to the premiere episode of the Kansas Legislature right here on Smoky Hills PBS in downtown Bunker Hill. I'm your host, Becky Kaiser, and we are very excited to kick off the season with four wonderful people who are here from the state legislature in Topeka. We appreciate their time, and we're hoping that you will participate with us this evening because they're here to answer any questions or listen to your ideas that you have, and I'm going to throw out that number right off the bat. It'll be at the bottom of your screen throughout the program, 1-800-337-4788. We also want to thank Fort Hays State University, the Docking Institute of Public Affairs, for their support of the program. First of all, what I'm going to do is go ahead and introduce everybody, starting at my left, and then we're going to come back and ask them to talk about what they are doing in this session, what committees they're on. So let's start to my immediate left. We have from Agra is Representative Ken Rahjes, and next to him is Representative Clarke Sanders, who of course is from Salina. Also joining us this evening is Senator Tory Marie Blew, who is from Great Bend, and Senator Rick Billinger, also at the end, not the least of course, who is from Goodland. So we appreciate all of you being here this evening. Let's come back to you, Ken, and start out this evening and remind everybody what committees you're on and what you're working on so far. You guys have been busy.
Very much so. Becky, always good to see you, always good for this opportunity. I'm chair of the Agriculture and Natural Resources Committee once again, also serve on appropriations and the Agriculture and Natural Resources Budget Committee. And so, yes, we hit the ground running hard the second Monday in January, and just today the House heard the last of the kind of budget report outs, as we call them. So next week we will put the budget together. We're about a month ahead of time. Agriculture's been busy, and next week's going to be very busy. We have a lot of different bills, from dealing with some water issues, rural attorneys, and a number of different issues that I think hopefully will continue to move agriculture forward.
Representative Sanders.
So I'm on Fed and State, a committee that normally is pretty busy. We haven't quite got cranked up to where we'll be. Starting next week, we'll be extremely busy. Then my 130 committee is higher ed budget. Now that more than makes up for what's not happening on Fed and State, because we've been hearing testimony from the various universities and the Kansas Board of Regents about what their budget, what they think their budget should be and what we think their budget should be. So I've been keeping really busy with that. And then my 330 committee is taxation, and that's always a big committee.
That's always a hot topic every year. Also joining us, Senator Blew. Tell us about your committees this year.
Well, hello. Glad to be here. My 830 committee is Agri-Natural Resources. My 930 committee is Local Government. 1030 Vice Chair of Fed and State, which I'm sure you guys will be getting a lot of bills from what we've been very busy in that committee. And then,
we've been warned.
Yes. The only difference I'd have to say is we deal with a lot of election bills, so versus the House has an elections committee. And then at 1:30 I'm on Commerce, and so it's been pretty slow. The hard part about Commerce is there's so much money that goes through Commerce, so there's a ton of reports that have to be reported to us, and so we're going over every single report. But the more and more we go over reports, the less days that we can have bill hearings. So that's just the downside.
And Senator Billinger.
Thank you, Becky, and appreciate being here with my colleagues. And I serve on the Senate Ways and Means. I chair that committee. It's my 9th year in Ways and Means. This year, something new. I am working also on the Efficiency Committee. I attended some of their meetings and trying to find efficiencies and cost savings, and we actually found a good one yesterday, so look forward to the questions.
You're asking for input from citizens about this,
yes,
right?
And had over 600 calls that crashed the system.
That's what I heard.
So it's, I think it's, hopefully we'll find some savings for our taxpayers.
Wonderful. Well, again, thank you all for being here, and let's talk about what's going on. Representative Sanders, we wanted to kind of start with you because there's been a lot of discussion about the budget, and you're ahead this year on what you're discussing about because you started earlier doing things a little bit differently this year.
Well, actually doing things quite a bit differently. Heretofore, and as best I know, it's always been done this way, is that the governor submits a budget, and then the House and the Senate look at it and tweak it and add to it and subtract from it and whatnot, and then it goes back to the governor, and but the process before has begun with the governor, regardless of whether it was a Republican or Democrat. The process now is the budget process is beginning in the House, and so it's been up to us to come up with a budget. Now, the governor did also submit a budget, but it's going to be up to the House, and Ken can address this in appropriations. But we'll come up with an overall budget, which is quite an undertaking, and then it'll go to the governor, and she'll tweak it. In other words, do the same thing that we used to do, and then it'll come back to us, and we'll go from there. But yeah, so it's been quite a bit different, and the people who write the bills, the revisers, have been extremely busy getting all this done, because we're on a much more compacted timetable to get the budget kicked out. And it's a thing that even before I ever got to the legislature, I was always wondering, why does it take till the last minute, seemingly the 11th hour, to get the budget together? And now we're working on the budget very early in the process, and we'll see how it goes. And so getting the budget together is one thing, getting it funded is another thing, but the process is much further down the road than it normally would be after 3 weeks.
Is that the major advantage, you would say, is that you're not waiting till that 11th hour?
Yes, because there's one thing that we're constitutionally mandated to do by the Kansas Constitution, and that's to pass a budget that is deficit-free. Now, it's supposed to be 7.5%. In the past, it's been as little as 0.1%. But unlike the federal Congress, we cannot pass a budget with a deficit. And so it's our single most important job, and I think it's well to have a process where it begins early on.
Well, let's turn to Representative Rahjes and talk a little bit about the funding and what's the scenarios have been. I've read that the budget is going to be a little bit tighter this year.
I think this kind of started back in November when the receipts came in. They're a little bit lower, and so things what seems to me is that the attitude kind of shifted to really be a little more austere and really watch the money. We shorted up pretty strong last year in a rainy day fund. We want to leave that where it is. And so really to scrutinize the dollars. We're in that process of all the COVID and all the federal assistance money that came into the state, and some programs that were started then are now going away. We've just decided, as a majority anyway in the legislature, that those federal programs probably will not be funded with state dollars. And so that's some of the back and forth of it, and just trying to make priorities. But I think you'll find next week, as we try to put the final stages on the first kind of step in the budget, is that everybody's probably going to be, have a bit of a haircut, if you will, on spending. When we talk, and I'm glad the Senate has brought up, this COJ and this Committee on Government Efficiency, Becky. But the challenge is this: if you put K-12 education spending and social service spending, that is 85–87% of the budget. So we're haggling over a pretty small amount, and I'm sure of those 600 calls, you could probably split the difference, and 300 says this is a terrible program, it needs to be cut. The other 300 may say, well, this is a program we have to have. But one of the things as we look, Becky, at how we're going to form this budget, we really need, and that's put the onus on the legislature to be transparent on where the spending is going, and really hold the agencies to task, but to really make priorities. And what role does the state government play? Protection and providing for an education for students, as what's in the Constitution. Beyond that, there's some discussion points. So I think that's where we'll see when this new process. It's a different way of doing things. And my concern is we just don't miss something in doing this fast pace, but you know, it's just because we didn't kind of have that almost month to kind of breathe a little bit and to build up. And that's fine. I think as we move forward, we will become better at it, and I think we'll continue to find more efficiencies, not only just in spending dollars, but the biggest thing I'm looking forward to is really digging into the rules and regulations and how we're hampering Kansans from doing what they should be able to do, but having to go through too many hoops, too many things that are not beneficial and are more just creating bureaucratic messes.
And that's, I'm going to guess, Senator Billinger, probably some of the phone calls that came into the COJ hotline is there are too many regulations, and that's something that you're taking a look at. Tell us about it.
You know, I really haven't seen any of the phone calls because it just went live yesterday.
Oh, yesterday, okay.
So I haven't seen any. I personally had an email from a person that had previously worked for the state and had some really good ideas on how we could improve that agency, and so I'm sure that'll be something that we will look at. But yeah, I just know that it was down because of the volume.
And that's a good thing in an odd way.
Well, it is. Yesterday we had the Medicaid General come in and just one little deal that he found where, you know, the bracelets that people wear in case they fall, you can push the button and get 911 and help and so forth. Anyway, it's been funded through Medicaid, and we're spending $8 million a year. He said we could do it just out of our own budget, out of SGF, for $55,000.
Wow.
So if that pans out, it saved us $7,950,000. You know, so
It's crazy.
yeah. So
It's a
it's
big
things
difference.
like that hopefully we'll get. So
Senator Blew, let's talk to you. What's on your plate? What are you looking at right at the moment?
So last year I spent a lot of time on childcare. That was my #1 topic. We got a bill passed, a compromise bill that we worked with the governor's office, passed through the House when I was in the House last year. And unfortunately it was not taken up in the Senate. So now as a new senator, that is my #1 topic. And part of it has to deal with the overburdensome red tape of regulations that do not need to be there. But on top of it, it also has to deal with the ratio for kiddos to the provider, and Kansas is overly regulated over that, and so we're one of 2 states that our infant to provider ratio is 0 to 3, and 32 states that have 0 to 4. And infant is the hardest part right now to get care for. And my biggest story is I had a daughter last year, and we were on the waiting list the day after my husband and I got married, and that was a 3.5-year wait for the day for my slot to open up. And that's because we pre-planned. There are so many parents out there that do not, or they try to pre-plan, but who knows how it's going to be, and then now they're out of the workforce. So with being on Commerce last year and being on Commerce this year, if we want an active workforce and so forth, then we need to have active childcare and affordable childcare as well.
That's amazing that it took so long. And that's been a big issue in the state. And I know, being from Hayes myself, that's something that there is a task force that's very active and looked at favorably by many places throughout Kansas on how well it's doing so far. But it's a big issue across the state and across the United States, actually.
Right. And there's not a cookie cutter solution, and so that's the hard part. Is we can look at other states and maybe this works well here, maybe it doesn't. The other thing too to look at, what I'm paying apparently is nothing compared to in these urban areas how much parents are paying. And when you bring it all down, you look at it, it's cheaper probably to stay home and not send your kid to childcare. I know one senator, her daughter had twins, and it was going to be $400 a week for one kid in infant care. So $800 for 2 kids, and times that, I mean, at that point, that's some people's paychecks.
There are 3 issues that it doesn't matter where you go in the state that are the top 3 issues. And they're affordable housing, affordable daycare, and taxes, but workforce. So, I mean, no matter where you go in the state, all the communities are dealing with affordable housing, affordable daycare, and workforce issues.
Well, and on that too, the question is, what comes first, the chicken or the egg?
Exactly.
And so we have to be able, it's kind of a lot like with taxes and the budget, it's a three-legged stool. I would consider that a three-legged stool, and we all have to work together on it.
Yeah, because if you can really help solve the affordable daycare problem, that'll go a long ways towards solving the workforce problem.
Sure.
Yeah.
Let's come back. I want to talk agriculture because we have heard Representative Rahjes about what is going on with agriculture nationally, internationally, concerned about tariffs with a couple of our trading partners in Mexico and Canada, and how that might possibly affect Kansas agriculture, and some numbers being thrown about that it's pretty big, that would have an impact, could have an impact on the state. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, and again, those are national issues, and as far as the state, what we do as a committee in the legislature is just try to keep our members informed. Last week we had all the commodity groups in for their annual report to the legislature, and they got peppered with a lot of those questions. Obviously, I think we're all concerned of what this might be. We don't want a trade war. Nobody wants a trade war. I think so far it's kind of been put on pause for a week, for a month, and it could have an impact. Obviously, if our markets are closed, I think as you see President Trump's team get into place, I think a lot of that will work itself out. A lot of those on the Hill want the president to do more trade agreements, and I think you'll see some of that. So I think, and the president has been very, very vocal in saying this is a negotiating tool, what these tariffs are. So I think it's just one thing to talk about. There may be some short-term pain to that. Many in agriculture don't want these tariffs. We want a market, and obviously in Kansas, wheat and sorghum are two great big ones, and sorghum, especially with China, and with what's going on there, could be a challenge. And so what we try to do here in the state in the legislature is to encourage to tell that story to our urban legislators as well, and to just really support our producers. And the things that we can do is just kind of give them some of the tools. A lot of these things are federal in nature. And of course, everybody wants to know what's going on in the Farm Bill. Really, what we do is a support mechanism, and the one thing we really can do and what we're working on is water. And we do have a water committee, but it kind of spills over. If it wasn't in such a situation, it would be under the natural resources part of agriculture. But water has its own committee. And Jim Medix from Scott City is the chair. Gary White from Ashland's the vice chair here in the House. So two farmers, two irrigators. And I mean, water is a concern for everybody, but I think to have that in an agriculture-based economy here in Kansas, to have those two kind of leading that charge is good. And we've been involved as well in trying to shepherd money and make it a good investment, only looking at irrigation and those in the Southwest, but all over the state, and really kind of lauding agriculture, especially the job that they're doing in reducing water use and really trying to be good stewards, and helping those in the urban areas to make sure they have good, clean, and have reliable sources, and our manufacturers as well. So there's a number of factors, and it's a broad coalition that's putting things together as we look at the future of water, because as I've told some of my colleagues, we can fight about every issue under the sun, but without water, it's a moot point. We have to have water to live and to survive and to be a vital economy. And so that's why I think over the last few years that we've been able to build a strong coalition to look at the future of water here in Kansas.
You mentioned in your opening statement that you were looking at some work next week on water issues, water bills. Can you tell us specifically what you'll talk about? One
of the things that we put together is a bill on a long-term kind of water task force, and looking at a number of different interests, not only from agriculture, irrigation, farm groups, municipalities, conservation districts, trying to bring folks together and to try to find that long-term solution. There was meetings over the summer that some folks put together, some local consult meetings, what they had around here, Salina, Dodge City, but all over the state. And so to bring together a whole lot of ideas of what this is, the legislature is really taking control and saying, we want to be the leader on water. The governor said, you know, she wants to do some things, so we're kind of working with her as well. But really, the lead's being done by the legislature as we move forward and find a long-term solution to funding some of these water programs. What actually does the state need? And so that's what we're going to be talking about to get support for this task force, to form this task force, to go all over the state, and then to come back with recommendations on what programs, what are the needs from what this group has brought together to serve, as I said earlier, not only just agriculture, but industry and the communities as well. So that's going to be a big focus. And there's some other, and the other big thing, and we'll probably talk about hopefully. I never thought we'd say this, but we have a shortage of lawyers in rural areas, and so we're going to tackle that as well, working with our friends at Washburn and KU School of Law. That if law students want to come back to rural and underserved areas, that there will be a loan forgiveness, and then really teach them, because there's things you need to know. Being a lawyer in rural Kansas is different than being a lawyer in Johnson County, and so I think that's key to, yet again, survival. We know accountants and some other folks are short too in our areas, but what I was reminded of, while accountants do a lot of good things, some lawyers do accountancy work, but accountants can't file some motions, and so we have to have that in order so everybody has literally their day in court. So there's a number, as you can see, there's a number of issues, big issues I believe we're trying to tackle.
I want to amplify something that Representative Rahjes touched on, and we are all from rural areas of the state. I mean, I'm from Salina, and we're kind of half rural, half urban. But some who believe that western Kansas begins west of Douglas County, don't really understand some of the issues facing those of us in rural Kansas. And it's really important because they have big numbers. You know, they come from the most populated areas of the state, and unfortunately, when it comes to agriculture, a lot of times it's out of sight, out of mind. And so it's important that we work with these legislators from eastern Kansas and get them to truly understand. I mean, you say, well, what's the biggest industry in the state? Oh, it's agriculture, and they give lip service to it, but that's about it. I mean, we have some real issues in farm country that the legislature needs to deal with, and we need help from people in the urban areas to get some of the things done we want to do.
I think people forget that what the economy based on ag, and everybody has to eat, and I think, you know, that it's easy when you're in a more urban area, you're not connected to it as much as we are out here in the rural areas, and I think people forget that. Truly is something that they need to talk about. Again, we want to remind you that you are welcome to give us a call this evening and talk about what is on your mind with our senators and representatives. It's a toll-free number that you can call, 1-800-337-4788, and we are hoping that you will do that for us. Let's move on. Well, actually, I want to come back to you, Representative Sanders. You talked about being and hearing from representatives of the higher ed committees and talking about budgets, and that's always something. I know that they're looking for increases, and you're talking about maybe not so much.
It's been a tough year. And the reason it's been a tough year, and I'm the vice chair of the House Higher Ed Budget Committee, is that the universities, for the most part, are used to coming in and pretty much, you know, getting what they want. And we don't have the latitude to do that this year. Their budgets are being more tightly scrutinized than they ever have in the past. And it's tough. And one of the things that happens that is kind of interesting is they'll come to higher ed budget and they'll make some requests, and if they don't get what they want, they'll go see Ken and Chairman Waymaster in appropriations, and if they don't get what they want there, they may go to the third floor office of Speaker of the House Dan Hawkins. Now, the people who are doing this, I don't blame them. They're tasked by their universities to get what they think they need. But it's kind of a real interesting dance, if you will, to make folks understand things are different this year. It's not the way it used to be, and you're not necessarily going to get all the money. Well, you're definitely not going to get all the money you want. I mean,
You've all alluded
not
to that
there.
already, that things are a little bit tighter. Why is that? What has changed?
Let me explain to you.
Please, Senator Billinger.
We're spending $500 million more than we're bringing in. That is why it's tighter this year. Not only that, groceries came off in July,
Ah, yes.
and that cost way more than we thought. We eliminated income tax on Social Security last year. We adjusted the standard deduction on homes from 40,000 to 80,000, I believe it was pretty close in there.
and we're talking about possibly 100,000.
Right, but I don't know we can afford 100,000.
Well, I don't either.
But on top of all that, Panasonic, I was over there a week ago, and they have 400 people hired. They're training. They will start producing batteries in March. By summer, they'll have another 1,000 employees. And with what the agreements were in the Apex bill that was signed and the agreements we have with Panasonic, we're going to be writing them a check for somewhere around $119 million. So that's the problem, and so we're trying to be very efficient in finding savings wherever we can and not overcommit. Now, we still have, a rainy day fund, it's a savings account, so we can use that when revenues don't come in as projected. We've got about $1.8 billion in that. Our ending balance in 24 and 25, 24 was about 2.2 billion. 25s is 1.7 billion. You can see where it's dropping, and 26 is digging in more to that. So that's why we're being very cautious. It's because we need to be good stewards of our money. In the past years, like the representative said, we've had some federal funding, and it was easy. I mean, the legislature, the House, the Senate, we worked hard with KU, put $100 million in there 2 years ago, wasn't it? And it allowed them to get matches. They have enough now to build their cancer hospital, $700 and some million hospital. Currently, they're in 36 different buildings. They'll all come to one campus. We worked with KU over the last, probably it's 2017, we started to get their designation as a cancer hospital. You got the Mayo Clinic, you got MD Anderson, and now you have KU. So, those are all important things. Like the representatives had talked earlier about things that we had done. Well, yes, we've been trying, and we've made a lot of progress on a lot of fronts. We've paid off a lot of debt. We've paid off bonding earlier. One of the bonds I'll tell you about, the governor, we had put in our budget to do some bonds, and we did the ones that had the higher interest rates and were callable. So we did that, and there was a couple of bonds that were very low rate. And last year, the governor went ahead and put money in her budget to pay this bond off. And our Ways and Means Committee sat there and we looked at it and we said, the rate is so low, the return on our investments is very good. We can make $1 million a year here just taking and invest that money. We invested it and didn't pay the bond off. Well, after that, Senator Mike Fagg from El Dorado, he got to look at it. He came into my office one day and he said, Rick, he said, did you realize this is compound interest? And I said, no, I didn't notice that. We hadn't asked that question when, we were looking, we were just looking at the interest rates. He says, when I was on the city commission in El Dorado Lake had a bond that was compound interest. He says, we contacted Senator Marshall, And Senator Marshall asked for forgiveness of the compound interest, and they did it. He said, I'm going to call him and see if he'll work on this one with me. So he called Senator Marshall, and Senator Marshall made that as his #1 priority, and so did Senator Moran. And then the governor asked the Water Department to write a letter asking for forgiveness. Representative Tracy Mann, carried it over in the House, and he supported it. Representative Derek Schmidt, he voted for it and supported it. Representative Ron Estes, he supported it and voted for it. And Cherie Davis, she supported and paid for it, all voted for it. It saved Kansas $41 million.
That's significant.
That's real money.
I understand that there is, and I'm not sure who threw this number out, but that everybody's looking at talking to agencies, departments about reducing their budgets by, I believe it was 7.5%, 7.5%. Is that feasible? Is it going to happen? Can everybody do that? You talked about the haircut. What do you think?
Well, in higher ed budget, that's what we've been asking people to do, and their first reaction is, but then they're going to just have to get into the weeds. Senator Billinger made the point, we're $500 million in the hole at this point. $450 million is what I've heard. But, what's $50 million a month for government? So, yeah. So, this is a new day, a new reality, and it's something that a lot of folks aren't used to being asked to do. I mean, their idea of making a cut, some of them, not all of them, because some of them have come in with where it would come from, is, well, we're not going to ask for an increase. Okay, well and good, but not asking for an increase is not the same as a cut.
I think another thing to think about too is not every agency uses state general fund money. So some of them are fee funded. So the question on that, for instance, there's one that I was told, I had some of their previous employees in my office talking about code and ways to help find ways to not spend as much money, but the purchasing process in the state of Kansas is a mess. And the fact that we're making, it sounds great in theory that we're going to have to utilize certain state contracts to have those folks where we're going to purchase our stuff through them, and we're supposed to be getting a discounted rate allegedly. But then where I'm at in Great Bend, the only contracts that they have are out of Wichita. So people are driving. For instance, a tractor tire blew in Great Bend, they had to utilize somebody from Wichita, pay $500 just to have them do the travel fee to change a tire when there's a local company who's been doing it for years. But they said this process to get a state contract is, we don't need to deal with it, it's a headache, so you guys can go ahead and find somebody else. If this is happening in Great Bend, it's happening elsewhere. And we talk about rural Kansas, maybe it works in Wichita, but it doesn't work out in our area.
I brought that up today in appropriations. We had the Department of Administration's budget, and of course, everything runs through the Department of Administration. And we have that in Norton at the Seviers Reservoir and in the state park there. The situation, they have a pickup that can't get fixed because they can't utilize somebody local to do it, or if certain parts they have to drive away to Salina. You've got to be kidding me. You've got to be kidding me. And so I think that's one thing you'll see is this procurement and these contracts. And I think, as the senator says, it may work great in our urban areas, but this is a big state, and so we need to support our local Main Street businesses. We will get this thing changed, whether it will be with this administration, within the Department of Administration, or the next administration and their Department of Administration. We will get this fixed, because this is absolutely, savings is important. And we had folks talking about that this week as well. We had the Capitol filled with pharmacists. Most of the pharmacies in western Kansas and over the state were closed. They were in to talk about, saving and making sure that people use their local pharmacies. And yeah, you may pay a little more, but it's important to keep rural Main Street alive. And so those are the type of things, as the senator said, that the type of savings, whether it be rules and regulations, whether it would be just common sense. I mean, that's probably the biggest thing. And a lot of new legislators, they get in and said, do things as a business. Well, you can have a business mindset, but again, government is very tough to do exactly like a business. Government, businesses, they raise or lower their prices based on whatever, and it's very tough because everybody has their favorite program, and it takes tax revenue to pay for that, or fees. And one thing that the Appropriations Committee has done this year is take another hard look again of where the fees are. And if these agencies, sub-agencies have pretty good ending balances, can we reduce those or give those back to those that are paid? And what's a good level? That's the other thing we're looking at. What's a good level to have kind of that safety net? Does a small agency that has a yearly budget of $480,000 need $1 million kind of in a reserve? That may be a bit much. Because it all adds up, Becky. It all adds up. $1, all of a sudden you do $1 times $1 million, well, that's $1 million.
We've been hearing a lot on the national scene about too many employees, governmental employees. Does the state of Kansas have the same problem, do you think? Anybody?
I think it depends on the agencies. Some of our agencies are understaffed. One, our attorneys for defense for people that don't have, the ability to, and these attorneys, we pay them about, I think we raised it last year to maybe $140 an hour. And when we don't have enough of those, we have to hire out of the independent counsel from, out of the system, and we pay them $240 an hour. So it would be, if we could fill all those slots, it would save us, $100 an hour on those positions. So it makes no sense to try to cut 7% there. It wouldn't. We spent $59 million on traveling nurses at Larned and Osawatomie last year. I mean, we just can't continue to do those type things. It's unaffordable. And so we're trying to figure out, how can we solve this issue? Get away from the traveling nurses and docs, because we don't have the money to do it.
This is my third year on Fed and State, and heretofore, every time an agency has come before Fed and State and they were talking about their workforce, all of them, up until the Kansas lottery this year, said that they have all the people that they have budgeted for. But the other agencies that I've talked to have presented at Fed and State, they have more money available in their budget than they have people that they have hired. They can't find the workforce either. So it's not just a problem with private enterprise, it's also a problem at the state level as well.
But there is talk, I know, I spoke with some House leadership over, okay, we can't find these people, we can't find jobs, we have so many open jobs. What can we utilize AI for? And so that worries me a little, because
you said AI, artificial intelligence.
Yes,
I
AI, I think it's so new that it worries a lot of people. But at the same time, it's one of those, I know a lot of people that when it's time for them to do their testimony on a bill, they just type in certain things in a chat GBT, it spits out their testimony, and they just come up and speak real quick and so forth. So anyways, it worries me, but at the same time, let's embrace technology if we can, and so forth. And I know I had a legislative post audit done a couple years ago after COVID. How many of these jobs that we have are now 100% remote? And so these agencies came back and they said, these are hybrid, these are remote, but we have the ability to possibly do more remote jobs. Okay, so my first thought of that was, then if we're going to do that, then let's start getting rid of some of these office spaces. Then we don't need to be paying for all these empty office spaces for all these employees that are not coming back to work. Now, I can tell you, as a mom, I don't know how some of these people are working 40 hours a week and not paying, and having their kid at home and being productive at home. With my 8-month, I can't work 40 hours a week and give it 100% my all. So there's some issues when we're talking about remote work. It works for a while, but I don't think it's the long-term answer as well. So again, the AI, remote work, so forth, there's so many things to look at with where we are with technology today.
We have on the phone calling from McPherson, Gary. And Gary, you have a question or comment for our panel this evening?
I do.
Go ahead.
I would like an answer as to why I am 65 years old. I still plan on working till I'm 70. I have Blue Cross Blue Shield Platinum Plan. I had to sign up for Part A Medicare, but they forced me to take Part B even though I already have health insurance because we have less than 20 employees. I would like to know why that is, and can that be changed?
I think that's a federal issue, and I don't think it can be changed at the state level.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. I say that as somebody who is in HR and has to deal with insurance. I don't get to pick my insurance, unfortunately. And so, granted, we are a union company, so there's also that side of it as well, but we don't get to pick our insurance, unfortunately. So I wish I had a better answer, but I think that's a great question for the federal delegation.
I want to take a look at some of the email questions that we have had come in and get to these before we run out of time this evening. And it looks like Senator Blew, you may have gotten a copy of this as well. This is from a voter in central Kansas talking about SCR 1610 adding any restriction on the right to bear arms is subject to the strict scrutiny standard, while our voting rights are not. This person would like to have you explain the strict scrutiny standard and explain about fairness and priorities.
We actually have a hearing on that, if I believe, coming up, and so it's in Fed and State, and so I look forward to that hearing. With being on Fed and State, it's a topic that we're looking at, but I wish I had a better answer on it. I know that there was a sitting senator that was asking for co-sponsors, and so at the time it sounded like a really great idea, but I need to look more into it. So I wish I could.
We've heard that bill on the House Fed and State, and basically strict scrutiny, and there's a lot of legalese into it, but what it boils down to is it's the highest possible standard has to be met in order for the court to affirm or disavow something.
Okay, so a little bit of information there, but we'll find out more coming up next week, after next week. This person also had a second question, and this is something that has been in the news quite a bit recently, and there was a little bit of movement on this. Representative Pat Proctor talking about ending the 3-day grace period for mail-in ballots. And he was also apparently questioning the security of drop boxes. This person feels like they need to be available for rural areas and working people, not actually reducing the number. So, and again, I believe this question was addressed to you, Senator Blew.
Yes, so we just passed that out of the Senate earlier this week, I believe. And there was a Supreme Court case stating that the 3-day grace period is unconstitutional. And so that was why it was also brought up again this year. It's been brought up in years past. The issue is what's coming through is I don't know about you, but I live out in the country. I don't get my mail on time. I spoke to another senator who he spoke to his county clerk, and his county clerk said just last week they received mail-in ballots from the primary. Just last week. So I think that shows you that you can't trust the mail system. Drop boxes, from the conversations that we've had with Secretary of State Scott Schwab, he said that that the drop boxes were utilized through some COVID dollars that were coming through. Counties had to apply if they wanted a drop box, but they had to be able to prove as well that they could maintain it, have it completely certified, so forth. They are underneath surveillance 24/7. When 7 o'clock hits on election night, somebody from both parties, Republican and Democrat, go together, get the ballots together, and they distribute them back to the county clerk together. So it's not one party is taking ballots and so forth. So for the drop boxes, there's been conversations to keep utilizing them, but the county clerks were the ones who said, we think that we could have so many drop boxes in this county. So some counties have a lot of drop boxes, some maybe only have one.
If you're going to mail in your ballot, so you request that you want a mail-in ballot, and I don't know how it is in the other 104 counties, but in Salina County, you can get put on the permanent list of who's going to get a mail-in ballot. So the date to mail in the date that those ballots go in the mail is approximately 3 weeks before the election. You need to fill it out right away, and you need to get it in the mail right away. And then, as a follow-up, what you need to do is after about 5 days, call your county clerk and ask if your ballot has arrived. And if it hasn't, give it another 2 or 3 days and ask again if it has arrived. And if it still hasn't, I would suggest that you talk to your county clerk about voting a provisional ballot in person at the county clerk's office in case it doesn't arrive. Now, I know that's a pain, but it's also not necessarily a smart thing to do to rely on the Postal Service to get it there and get it postmarked, and that's another thing that happens. Sometimes ballots come in and they haven't been postmarked, and that invalidates them. So be proactive and follow through to make sure that your ballot has arrived at its destination, and don't wait till like the Friday before the Tuesday election. Get on that right away.
Good advice. Let's talk a little bit about discussion of some things regarding a possibility of increasing the minimum wage in the state of Kansas. Some top Democrats, along with the governor, suggesting that it should be raised to $15 an hour, and this was apparently in response to a Republican idea about eliminating taxes on tips that some servers and people like that would get. Let's start with you, Senator Billinger. Is it a good idea?
Well, I don't think there's anybody. I'd like to know if there's anybody working for that minimum wage today, which is $7 and whatever.
It's certainly gone up lots of places.
And I believe that this is up to the employers. They're going to pay what they can afford to pay. I don't think government ought to be telling them, you've got to pay Ken this much. I think if high school kids want to work at a restaurant and they're paying them $12 an hour, that's what the going wage is, you know, and somewhere else it might be $18. It may be way over the 15. You know, it probably depends, in my opinion, on what type of work they're doing, you know. But I was in business for almost over 35 years, and you know, I paid what I could pay. So.
Well, and I think a great example of why $15 is not going to work is look at Target. Target raised their wages to $15 an hour, and then they cut their employees' hours back. So just because you got a pay raise, but then they were taking home a lot less money and so forth. So I mean, there's certain companies you can look at on it doesn't work out that way. So I appreciate where they're coming from with it, but at the same time, I think it's up to local businesses what to do.
I agree. I don't think that the government has any role in negotiating the pay rates for their employees. That needs to be between the employers and the employees. Now, it's kind of interesting. The Democrats held a news conference about this. I believe it was Wednesday. And so, like I say, I sit on committees with Democrats, and I asked one of my Democrat friends, so what's going on with this minimum wage thing? He says, I don't know. I said, well, your leadership is proposing it. And he said, wonder where? And this is, a Democrat. And there was two other Democrats on that committee, and one of them was fully aware, and one of them was, well, I kind of sort of heard, so I don't think that is really going anywhere.
No, it's a non-issue. We made the news, obviously. The Senate is working on the no tax on tips, following what President Trump wants, and so we'll see where that goes. It's starting on their side. Let's cut to the chase on this. It's not about minimum wage. It's not about a trading wage. If the minimum wage goes up, management wages go up. Everybody goes up. So let's really have that full conversation. It sounds good. I'd like to talk about a living wage. There really much business. There really much business, even in the big communities, let alone the small communities. I agree. The marketplace should decide what that wage is. I have always encouraged folks, you want to better yourself, go back, get that certificate, go back, get more education, get that training you need to qualify for those higher jobs, those higher wage jobs. I have a son who's a welder that does quite well, has a certificate. I have 3 other kids that have bachelor's degrees. They're all doing well, but they have all earned it based on the credentials that they have. And so and the marketplace has determined that. So I think a lot of these things, Becky, I would say follow our lead. We'll be okay.
And another thing that I want to bring up here is we all hear on a semi-regular basis, well, the Kansas Legislature is considering raising the minimum wage. No, we're not. I mean, we might, but this hasn't even been introduced in a committee, let alone passed out of a committee. And I would argue until it gets somewhere along in the process, and that process would be the bill gets drawn up, the bill gets introduced in a committee, the bill passes out of a committee, and the bill gets to the floor of the Kansas House or the Kansas Senate for a debate and a vote. Now, if it gets to the floor of either chamber, then it's fair to say the Kansas Legislature is considering X, Y, or Z. If it doesn't get to that point, we're not. But it makes for a good news story.
So you're blaming the media on how we word that, right?
I actually am. And I mean, what would be better is the Democratic leadership in this case has called a news conference today to say that they would like to see the minimum wage increased. Okay, I'm sure that's true. There were 22 of them who signed off on it. So yeah, the Democratic leadership and some of the Democrat rank and file, maybe they're considering it, but not the Kansas Legislature, not at this point.
Okay, I will wait till that point next time to bring it up. We have just a couple minutes left. I thought we might end with the perpetual topic about Medicaid expansion. We talked, there was a question that we heard about Medicare, which of course is at the federal level, but Medicaid, the governor again advocating for expansion of the Medicaid program. Is it going to happen? Let's just go around the table and get your opinions on that.
No, but what we're going to do is continue to fight, along with Senator Billinger, is to get the reimbursement rates higher for a critical access hospital. That's what we can do, and that's what we're continuing to fight for.
It's not going to happen. However, I've heard indications that there is going to be some bill brought before the Health and Human Services Committee on the House side that is going to allow for an amendment to be offered. I'm not sure what the main bill is, but the leadership has indicated that they would allow debate on a possible amendment. And so we'll see where it goes from there. But here again, that's only possible debate. And even if it gets passed successfully out of committee as amended, that doesn't mean it'll ever come to the floor of the House.
Senator Blew.
No, I think that the legislature did a great job last year on increasing the reimbursement rate, but then when I found out through the Kansas Medical Society that not all doctors received that reimbursement rate, only some did, and that the money was withheld from them. That's not okay. So we need to figure out where is that money, and that needs to go to those doctors, so forth, and if we need to look at it and make sure. What drives me crazy is we've seen a lot of things happen over when we're not in session of interest money being spent that the legislature never appropriated for. So there's a lot of things going on behind the scenes that we don't know about, and that needs to be changed. So I think with what Ken said, we need to continue to look at that.
Senator Billinger.
I agree with my colleagues. There's less folks there today that support it than there has been in probably all my time there.
Well, I'm sure we'll be talking about it again. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We have been talking with Representative Rahjes from Agra. We've been talking with Representative Sanders from Salina, Senator Blew from Great Bend, and Senator Billinger from Goodland. Thank you for spending your time with us. Thank you for spending your time with us this evening. We appreciate it. And thank you to Smoky Hills Public Television and also the Fort Hays State University Docking Institute of Public Affairs for helping support our program. I'm Becky Kaiser with Eagle Media out of Hays. Thank you for joining us this evening. We'll see you next time.